Before ultra-realistic graphics, jump scares, and surround sound, horror had to work a little differently. On the NES, SNES, and early PC, developers had to squeeze every ounce of fear out of pixelated sprites, creepy music, and your imagination. And you know what? Sometimes that made the scares hit even harder. Today we're diving into 5 retro horror games that didn't need fancy graphics to keep you up all night, from disturbing stories to unsettling atmosphere to bosses that will haunt your dreams. I'm Professor Retro, and these are 5 lesser-known retro horror games. Rule of Rose, which was developed by Punchline and released in 2006, arrived late in the PS2's life cycle. Now at first glance, it seems like it rode the coattails of games like Silent Hill and Haunting Grounds, but it quickly gained infamy not because of its gameplay but because of the story it dared to tell. On the surface, Rule of Rose looks like just another forgotten survival horror game from the PlayStation 2 era, but under its grainy visuals and stiff controls lies something much, much darker, a disturbing tale of cruelty, childhood trauma, and the monsters that live in the human heart. The game was banned or heavily censored in several countries due to rumors that it depicted child abuse and sadism. Even though some of these claims were exaggerated, the controversy was enough to bury the game in obscurity, and today a physical copy can sell for hundreds of dollars. Which I was in disbelief of that claim until I looked it up on eBay and found someone selling the game for $2,000. Here, look at this listing. You play as Jennifer, a young woman in 1930s England who finds herself trapped in a twisted world ruled by all things of children. She's forced into servitude by the aristocracy of the Red Crayon, a cruel gang of orphans who deem constant offerings to maintain her place among them. The deeper you go, the more surreal the game becomes. Each chapter unfolds like a dark fairy tale, revealing fragments of Jennifer's past and the trauma she endured. What seems like childish cruelty slowly unravels into something far, far more disturbing. An exploration of bullying, abuse, and how children can sometimes be more terrifying than the monsters. Now, the gameplay is a Rule of Rose is clunky, and to say the least, combat feels stiff. And you'll often rely on your dog companion, Brown, to track items and guide you, but in a way, that awkwardness adds to the vulnerability. You're not a trapped fighter, you're a victim trapped in a nightmare with few ways to fight back. Where the game truly shines is atmosphere. The haunting airships Megasaka might not be combined with unsettling environments from orphanage to airships makes the world feel oppressive and suffocating. It's less about jump scares and more about psychological discomfort. Despite its flaws, Rule of Rose has become a cult classic. Horror fans who manage to play it often describe it as one of the most disturbing and emotionally impactful games they've ever played. Its rarity has only fueled its reputation, turning it into a kind of a forbidden treasure for the PS2 horror. It's a game that doesn't just scare you with monsters and fills you with themes most games would never dare touch. Released in 2000 by a company called Visual Science and later picked up by NEC Interchannel, 7 Mansions, Ghastly Smile, is a survival horror game that never officially left Japan. Now yes, it borrows a lot from Resident Evil, fixed camera angles, tank controls, item management, creepy mansion exploration, you know the whole drill, but what makes it stand out is its bizarre mix of horror and weirdly lighthearted tone. You play as 2 treasure hunters, Araka and Ryoko, who get trapped into a mansion filled with puzzles, monsters, and mysteries. And if that doesn't scream Resident Evil clone, I don't know what does. The game honestly plays like your usual Dreamcast-era survival horror title. You got the usual setup: navigate claustrophobic rooms, solve puzzles, collect keys, and fight monsters with limited ammo. But here's the twist. You can switch between 2 characters, each has slightly different abilities and perspectives, and sometimes you'll need to swap to progress. And there's a nice layer of strategies through the clunky controls don't always do it favors. Yeah, the combat is awkward, shooting enemies feels stiff, hit detection isn't always great, and don't get me started on the camera angles, but if you're into old school survival horror jank, there's a certain charm here. Now here's a question you're all going to be asking. Is it scary? Sort of. The game tries to go for tension with its soundtrack, creepy hallways, and bizarre enemy design, but then it completely undercuts itself with awkward voice acting and unintentional comedy. And speaking of voice acting, this game has full English voiceover despite never leaving Japan for some reason. And let me tell you, they are gloriously bad. Characters will deliver lines with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list, which turns tense moments into laugh-out-loud comedy. So why haven't we heard of this game? Well, for one, it never came out officially. The only way to play it outside of Japan was to import it, and even then most players passed it over because it looked like a Resident Evil knockoff. But over the years, it gained a bit of cult following. Dreamcast fans and survival horror collectors kept it alive, especially thanks to fan translations that make it more accessible. It's not a lost masterpiece, but it's a fascinating piece of the Dreamcast history. Back in the year 2000, Eidos Interactive dropped a game that makes cyberpunk horror with film noir into one stylish package. No, I'm not talking Delimits, and I'm talking about Fear Effect, a game that tried to push the PlayStation to its absolute limits and still stands out today for its mix of action, atmosphere, and absolute PS1 weirdness. Fear Effect was developed by Kronos Digital Entertainment, the same team that worked on Criticom and Cardinal Sin, but don't hold that against them. This was their magnum opus. The game follows Hannah, Lass, and Biki, a trio of mercenaries hired to rescue the kidnapped daughter of a powerful triad boss, but what starts out as a gritty crime job in Hong Kong spirals into demons, ancient rituals, and supernatural chaos. Right off the bat, you'll notice one thing: style. This game oozes it. From the cel-shaded character models to the full motion video backgrounds, Fear Effect doesn't look like anything you find on the PS1. Every level is alive, with flickering neon, smoke, fire, and yeah, way too much blood. The gameplay in Fear Effect is like Resident Evil had a cyberpunk fever dream. You get tank controls, fixed camera angles, and puzzle solving, but instead of zombies, you're blasting your way through mobsters and monsters. Combat is fanatic. You're dual-wielding guns, rolling around dodging, and yes, dying a whole hell of a lot. Fear Effect is not shy about killing you in the most gruesome ways possible, and that's kind of the point. The game's entire health system is called the Fear Effect meter. It doubles as your life bar and your stress level. Take damage, freak out, and get into tense situations, and your fear meter spikes. Calm monsters? It lowers, but push it to the far, and yeah, you're dead. Now, like any survival horror game of its time, the puzzles can be absolutely brutal. Some are clever, some are head-scratchers, and some are, well, who the hell thought of this? And since this is the PS1 era, failing a puzzle often means instant death. Hope you saved recently. However, sadly, Kronos never got to finish the trilogy. Fear Effect 2 Retro Helix was released in 2001, but the planned sequel, Fear Effect Inferno, was cancelled after Eidos dropped it. Years later, we get Fear Effects Sedna and Fear Effect Reinvented, but let's just say they didn't quite capture the magic of the originals. Released in 1999 by SNK and developed by Saknoth, a studio founded by Hirakawa Kikata, which I probably butchered, best known for composing Secrets of Mana, but instead of making another bright and colorful RPG, Kikuta wanted something much darker, something that blended the unseemly tensions of Resident Evil with the storytelling and depth of Final Fantasy. And with that, Koudelka was born, a gothic horror RPG set in a haunted monastery in Wales at the turn of the 20th century. Now you play as Koudelka Insat, a young woman with psychic powers who's drawn to the monastery by disturbing visions. There she meets Edward, a cynical mercenary, and James, a priest with his own secrets. Together, the three uncover the horrifying past of the monastery, complete with ghosts, grotesque monsters, and dark rituals. The story is told through a series of pre-rendered cutscenes, in which the acting feels stiff by today's standards, but for 1999, it was surprisingly cinematic. The dialogue leans heavily into character drama, and honestly, the bickering between Koudelka, Edward, and James give the game more personality than most horror titles at the time. Now here's where things get a bit interesting. Instead of real-time combat like Resident Evil, Koudelka uses turn-based battles on a smaller grid. You can move characters around, attack, or use weapons and magic. Enemies range from creepy zombies to horrifying abominations, and designs are some of the most unsettling you could find on the PS1. Now the combat is slow, I mean painfully slow at times. Battles can drag on, and the encounter rate is way too high for a horror game that relies on atmosphere. While the RPG mechanics are solid, they clash with the pacing of survival horror. It's an ambitious idea, but one that doesn't quite work as smoothly as intended. Where Koudelka does succeed is in its atmosphere. The pre-rendered backgrounds are absolutely gorgeous in the late 90s PS1 way. With mood lighting, crumbling gothic architecture, and unsettling sound design, the music, which is also composed by Koudelka, shifts between eerie silence and haunting melodies, making the game feel tense even when there's nothing happening. It's not as in-your-face scary as Resident Evil, but it has this lingering dread, a slow burn type of horror that stays with you. Koudelka received mixed reviews when it launched. Critics praised the atmosphere and story, but complained about the sluggish combat and awkward pacing. Sales were modest, but the gastronomy. Most importantly, Koudelka laid the groundwork for games like Shadow Hearts, a spiritual successor that refined the horror RPG formula. Shadow Hearts went on to become a beloved PS2 title, but it all started with this strange atmospheric experiment. Now for our final entry into this list, Sweet Home. Before Resident Evil defined survival horror, before Silent Hill made us question our sanity, there was a little NES game called Sweet Home, released only in Japan in 1989. This game not only terrified players, but also laid the foundation for an entire genre, and if you've never heard of it, don't worry, you're about to. Sweet Home is based on a Japanese horror movie of the same name, directed by, I'm going to butcher this, Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Capcom decided to adapt it into a game, and instead of just a simple tie-in, they created something that would change gaming forever. Now at first glance, Sweet Home looks like a typical RPG. You get characters, stats, exploration, even turn-based combat. But the further you go, the more you realize it's a survival horror experience hiding under the 8-bit shell. You control a group of 5 people trapped inside a haunted mansion. Each one has their own special item: a lighter, a vacuum, a camera, a first aid kit, and a key. Sound familiar? That's because Resident Evil would later reuse this exact concept of unique character abilities. The mansion itself is full of locked doors, hidden passages, and creepy artwork, and, of course, dangerous spirits. You can split your party into smaller groups, forcing you to balance safety with exploration. However, if your character dies, they are gone for good. There are no revives, no second chances, which makes every decision you feel heavy, just like modern survival horror. What really sells Sweet Home is the atmosphere. The NES may not have been capable of realistic gore, but the game makes up for with unsettling imagery, rotting corpses, blood-smeared walls, and haunting ghost designs. And the music pushes it even further, tense, eerie, and designed to make you feel constantly on edge. For a Famicom game, it's shockingly effective. And when you pair it with a permadeath mechanic, suddenly every hallway feels like a risk. Now here's the kicker. Capcom didn't just leave Sweet Home as a forgotten experiment. No, Shinji Miyake, the creator of Resident Evil, directly cited the game as the main influence of his series. Door opening transition straight from Sweet Home, a big creepy mansion, Sweet Home, limited items and inventory management, yep, Sweet Home. You could say without the obscure Famicom title, we might have never got Resident Evil, and survival horror as we know it might not even exist. Sweet Home was one of those games that feels ahead of its time, creepy, challenging, and revolutionary. It pushed the limits of what an NES horror game could be. It's a shame it never officially left Japan, but thanks to fan translations, you could finally experience it today. So if you're a fan of surreal horror or just want to see where the genre began, Sweet Home is more than worth a visit. Just be prepared, because once you step inside the mansion, not everyone is going to make it out alive. And that's it for 5 retro horror games that proved you don't need 4K graphics to get under someone's skin. Sometimes a few pixels, eerie music, and your own imagination can be way scarier than the most realistic jump scare possible. Which of these games do you think is the creepiest, or did I miss one of your favorites? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what haunted your childhood over the years. If you enjoyed this trip into retro horror, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss future deep dives into classic games. Until next time, keep your candles lit and your save files safe. I'm Professor Retro saying peace out, stay frosty, and happy Halloween.